Hello all. Nice and muddy out. It's been kind of off and on drizzle rain. Not very much in quantity, but it just keeps everything wet, which is good. That's what California needs. It's funny. This hat reflects noise and it makes it sound like someone's right behind you. And you flip around, there's no one there at all. But once again, that's not what I'm here to talk about today. I'm here to talk about CO2 and CO2 removal, I guess you might want to call it. Very difficult process to do. And the more we delay, the worse it gets. Well, you're upside down. So before we start, let's go over and look at the CO2 readings for last year and this year. Okay, so you take the last year's and you minus this year's and you get the growth of the CO2, how fast it's growing. And as you can see, it's increasing so fast. The globe doesn't change like this in its normal state. You wouldn't see CO2 numbers changing this fast. So many are calling to interfere and take CO2 out of the atmosphere. Boy, that's a long video. First of all, there's been several examples given. I'm going to just go with Sean's because he was talking about that on my last video. He was saying that sulfur is a natural airborne pollutant that would block out the sun and cool the planet, which is absolutely correct. That's how the volcanoes do it. They cool with things way down to where you get even close to an ice age. But then after a few years, the sulfur falls out of the air and changes and no longer is blocking the sun. And then suddenly there's a huge increase in temperature. A spike happens. And it usually, between the cold and the spike of the heat after a large volcano, you end up with large die-offs. In fact, the biggest die-offs on the planet are caused by volcanoes. The second would be the meteorites, or meteors crashing into the planet. So, what's wrong with doing the sulfur idea? Well, pretty much you just have to look at history to see how well that works. First of all, it doesn't take CO2 out of the atmosphere. So you're not changing anything. You're just cooling it down with air conditioning. That only lasts so far. There's a lot of downsides for putting sulfur in the air. Again, look at history. So I have to say, I would X that one completely off the chart. I think we're pretty much stuck with the way nature does it. The reason that is, let me steady you here. Don't have the tripod because it's going to rain. I can't have the tripod. The umbrella, the camera, all this stuff. So I just take the handheld and I just hold the camera with a little tiny tripod on the bottom of it. If you take CO2 out of the air and you permanently sequester it so it can never become part of the air again, that's the stupidest thing humans could do. The amount of CO2 there is on the planet, in the oceans, and in the atmosphere is the right amount. It's already been figured for us. So we must sequester it in the natural way. You need to put huge forests up all over the land, with also a large amount of undergrowth. Move all your farming indoors in vertical and horizontal farming. Probably horizontal for grains and cereals, and vertical for fruits and vegetables. Become a vegetarian. The whole society is going to have to do that sooner or later, and it's probably going to end up being sooner, just purely because of what we're doing to the planet by eating meat and the raising of meat and the footprint it costs our poor planet is huge. And let's not forget, every time you eat an animal, you're killing it. Yourself killed that animal because you went and purchased it. That is on you. So every time you eat meat, you're killing an animal. Think about that. You probably would rather not. Most people would rather not. So my thoughts on CO2 removal is do it slowly, do it accurately, the way the planet would do it. Once you get your forests up and your undergrowth going, and you've got vertical and horizontal farming, all these sources are drinking up tons of CO2. So that's your choice. It's not putting chemicals in the atmosphere or in the ocean, trying to make algae blooms that would drink up CO2, because it would just immediately, once those algae die, would return to the atmosphere. And that wouldn't work either. Arm gets tired. Jeez, camera's heavy. So it's very, very important that we don't put any more CO2 in the air. It's already overloaded. And we're going to have a hell of a time trying to get rid of what we have. We don't need to put more in, make the problem even bigger. And there's so much that each and every one of us can do to curb our CO2 footprint. There's 100 people on this channel regularly. So if 100 of us all became vegetarians, drove a used vehicle that was small and economic on petrol, and lived near our work, don't use plastic, one-use plastic, you know, it would help. It would help the planet if 100 of us did something like that. So don't think that it's too little too late. It never is. The sinking ship is never little too late. You should always work on the problem. Don't just give up. There's no life rafts on this ship. We die if we do not do this right. And it's not die instantaneously. Well, some will, as we're seeing with huge floods and things. Undergrowth is very important. It drinks up a lot of CO2 also. When the plants drink it up, they hold it. And then when they're either they die and start to rot, they release their CO2. It's a natural cycle. We need to get the planet cooler, which really shouldn't be too hard, since it's on a naturally cooling orbit as we speak. For the next several million years, we will be getting cooler because of the orbit. So putting the CO2 in forests is a good place. The reason has to be, whoops, there's no screen. The reason has to be clear, because if and when it does get cooler and cooler as the thousands of years go on, you have a way of releasing more and more CO2 into the atmosphere to keep the temperature more mild. I do appreciate all the comments on the last videos. They were good, interesting, different topics. Let's discuss comments section for a minute, since people are thinking I'm removing comments, and I'm not. I do not do that anymore unless there's a huge troll attack, and that's the last time I did it, and we only did a few. So every time I comment on YouTube, it makes other people's comments disappear. Now I don't know if that's from everyone or just some, but at least for me, and others are saying the same thing with complaints of me removing comments. I promise you I will not do that. If you're sticking to the subject, sort of, in a kind of a way, and not, you know, causing danger or anything, or misery for me. If you're out there just to troll me, then I just delete it. But I haven't had to do that, because on this channel we really love serious discussions, and I really appreciate it, and appreciate whatever anybody can do to mitigate their CO2 footprint. We're also trying to get as many subscribers as we can, so we can get at least 1,000, so that I can go ahead and start a live stream in a studio that I'll make probably starting either this week or next week. If you feel like doing that, if not, no big deal. Over half our audience are not subscribers. It used to be like 80%, now it's about 50% or 60% aren't subscribers. So we have plenty of people that if you want to help, you could subscribe and we could get to that 1,000 mark. YouTube, what can I say? Fix your comment section. That had to have hurt. So until next time.